Nerdy City flipped our world upside down and made things stranger with their nostalgic suburban horror game, Remembrance. Then, they made our skin crawl with a game based on the videos so gross and disturbing they were termed nasty with their horrifying tabletop, RPG Nasty. Now they send us back to the Saturday morning cartoons and brightly painted plastic toys we remember from our childhood that were more than met the eye. Commandroids, the first installment of the Radical Shadows universe, puts you in the driver's seat of your very own transforming robot. With a Kickstarter launching in the beginning of August, you can live out the battles between the heroic Symbitrons and the dastardly Nemesites in a world transformed. To be part of this Kickstarter and contribute, please search for Commandroids on Kickstarter or visit nerdycity.com for more information.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Are you ready to get down with some D&D? I know I am, and I am joined, as I am always joined, by the magnificent, marvelous, and melted, maybe even monumental, Mad Wizard Merwin. Hey, buddy, what's going on?
I'm particularly salty today, Chris. We've had lots of drama and some deaths in our family, and now I've come back and I'm ready to get back to work, and so I don't have much patience today for any tomfoolery. So if I get a little uppity, that's why.
Why don't we get right to it then, since
All
you
right.
have no patience for tomfoolery? I will disengage from the tomfoolery.
Your tomfoolery
Rus-
is fine.
Oh, okay. Well, then the Avengers Endgame writers and, other amazing Marvel movies, the Russo brothers, they talked about playing D&D endlessly on their Reddit AMA.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. This morning I was just scrolling through Twitter and I saw people quoting them at their Reddit AMA. Someone asked what they do, or what they did right after production ended on Avengers Endgame. And they said that they both went on family vacations with their separate families. But when they returned, they played Lost Mind of Phandelver again, like they do endlessly. So it sounds like that they play D&D quite a bit. And it sounds like Lost Minds of Phandelver is something that they've gone back to several times to play. I thought that was just pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. Also, a really good adventure, so,
Yeah, I wonder if they will pick up the new Essentials box set and play a different game in Phandalin.
Oh, I wonder who's directing the new D&D movie.
Yeah, I've heard some news about that too, but I wasn't ready to put that up yet.
I'm just saying, the Russo brothers like D&D.
They do,
Just saying.
and they've been known to direct big budget movies.
That's true. Like, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yep.
I mean, this is not a rumor or anything like that. We're just, pontificating.
Sure.
Tell me about AL Season 9 stuff.
So for the last couple of seasons, they've changed up the rules, trying to fine-tune things and meet expectations not just of players, but of wizards and of themselves and of new players. And so when Season 9, Season 9 hasn't launched yet, but it's coming around. And they've put up new rules about seasonality, where we've talked about that before, where if you create a character specifically for this season, they're good. If you use characters from previous seasons, you don't get unlocks or story awards. Not a big deal, but of course, people being people whined and gnashed their teeth about it, like it's the only thing going on in the world. So they've put out new rules, they've listened to people's feedback, and they even went ahead and did a survey about what players look for most in their Adventures League play. What's the most important thing to you? Is it magic items? Is it portability of character? These sorts of questions that allowed them to go back and revise their rules. So right now they are using their blog on dndadventuresleague.org website to talk about these rules changes, what they're thinking of doing. And even as they put them out and get feedback, they're continuing to tweak the rules because they are, in fact, listening to the players, despite what you might see if you happened to end up on the Facebook AL group, and it sounds like the sky is falling. So it's still up in the air, but starting to come into focus. The season itself launches in September when the Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus book releases. So if you're an AL player, keep an eye on that. It's not going to be relevant for another few weeks in terms of what the actual new rules for the new season is going to be, but they are continuing to tweak those.
I get that a lot of people are whatever about it, right? Like, it's probably a small vocal minority, I would imagine, that are saying the things that they need to say. But it's very nice, I think, that they are using the AL blog to talk about all this stuff and being very transparent and public with it. Like, I think that's a good policy to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's good. God bless them, because their patience is so. My patience, I think, is pretty high. And they are just rolling with all this stuff, and so the AL admins are doing an incredible job of juggling, the needs of Wizards of the Coast, the needs of the players, and all of that stuff to keep the program running.
Yeah, I mean it's a tricky program to run, especially after 9 seasons, right?
Yeah,
you have to.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, because you have to cater to a bunch of different crowds at this point. The people who have been playing for forever, the people who are potentially new to the hobby and want to play and get in and not feel like they're being overwhelmed by everything else, and people who are serious and casual.
Yeah, and it's funny because since we're delving into this, this is the first time that I've been working on looking at or working with an organized play campaign where the sales of the base game are continuing to rise rather than falling. And so that changes the way that the Adventurers League needs to look at its own role, right? If it's going to be a gateway for new players, it needs to change with the game. It needs to change with the market. And so we always get into this area where the invested players are invested because they like the rules, and new players are not being served by the rules for the Adventurers League. So, where this conflict is, there needs to be a resolution. And I would have just scrapped the whole thing and started over long ago, and come up with new rules to slow down the issues that are causing new players to come to an Adventurers League game and be turned off right away because of the players and their characters that are already invested. So it's always got to be that. And the more people complain, all it is reinforcing why new players don't want anything to do with them because of that attitude they have.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, instead of being accepting and ready for change and ready to do new things and bring in new people, it's just all about them and all about their characters and all about their big bad magic items. And it's off-putting, and it's just reinforcing this negativity that the Adventurers League admins are trying to quelch and bring up to a level where new players can get involved.
Yeah, I tend to hang out with a lot of people who don't play D&D and a lot of people who do play D&D, and I've always had the impression, for the most part, that this iteration of the Adventurers League and the people playing it have been far more welcoming, and it's been a far more open experience. I'm a little disappointed to hear that there's so many people who are trying to be exclusionary because they're not really concerned with the game as a whole, but just concerned with themselves, which, I get the self-centered thing, like, it happens sometimes, but if you're one of those people, maybe you should think about making the game a more accepting and open place. Think about just being radically accepting.
Right, and understand that you are being this way, right? Most people don't even realize they're doing it. They're just so tunnel vision on what they want and what their needs are that they don't even understand how selfish they're being and how negative they're being to what could be a very inclusionary and very bountiful gate for new players into the game.
Yeah, it doesn't take very many people to ruin a thing for everybody else too. So
yep, and it's also the internet, so there's that.
Yeah, but like I said, it's probably a very vocal minority that are causing these problems, I would imagine.
It's pretty true, yeah.
Yeah. So, all you folks out there who are being awesome ambassadors, keep being awesome ambassadors. All you folks out there that are not necessarily being awesome ambassadors, maybe reevaluate.
Please, and thank you.
Let's talk about being paid to run games, paid to DM, and why it's such a controversy.
Yeah, so this article came out a while ago.
It did. I read it a while ago.
In Bloomberg about people who are being paid to DM.
Which is pretty cool, if you ask me.
Yep. So they interviewed a couple people. One of them, his last name was Chulik, and he works, I believe, in Los Angeles, where he has a different job. He has a full-time job, but he also, on the side, runs D&D games for money. So,
Yeah, this is totally his side hustle.
Yep. So, for example, you can hire him to run an individual beginner campaign for about $300 for 4 to 6 players. Or if you want to pay more, he will come to your office and run a D&D team building activity for $500. He rents a full studio so he can stream games that he runs on Twitch. There's all different sorts of things that he does. And for that fee, you get very customized experiences. So he will make terrain, or he will make little props that you can use. He talked about making potions that he put in little flasks. It was just like, water and some food coloring and some flavoring. So if you use the potion, you actually drink the potion, and so it's kind of a cool live action experience.
Yeah, and as it says in the article, it's not necessary for the adventure, but it just adds that bit more depth, especially if you're paying for it.
Yeah. And, I don't see anything surprising in this, because for the last 20 years I've been heavily involved in the industry. And, I know that a great experience is worth a lot of money. I've seen people at conventions pay a good chunk of change to get a great, long, fun experience. But there seems to be, again, internet, this group of people who are outraged that someone would charge money to DM.
I have no idea why people are outraged by that. It
Right.
doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. If there is a market for it, then make your money.
I agree.
Gi-
I mean,
give-
that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah. I mean, do your thing, right? Do the thing that you do, DM, to the best of your ability, and get compensated for it the way that you can. It's a lot of work to DM. And just because you DM for free and you're, the best DM ever or whatever, and your players have the best time ever, doesn't mean that other people can't do it.
Yeah. Can we break down this first? Can we break this down for a second?
I'd love
why,
to.
Why I think it's cool.
Yeah.
So this gentleman, Chaluik, he is customizing experiences for beginning groups. Like he's actually crafting things for them so that they can introduce them to play. He is taking time he's taking time to actually craft props and craft a process to create a team building activity, or to just create an adventure that is customized for the people who are paying for it. This is time outside of the normal idea of what we consider prep. This is the kind of stuff. I mean, if you can make money off of just showing up with your prep and running your game for people, that's awesome too, because it's a capitalist society. If you can make money off of a service, great. But from what it sounds like this gentleman's doing, it's entertaining, it's engaging, it's a step above what the average game master is doing, or dungeon master is doing at their table. So I think if you want to sell your services, that's one of the ways that you go and you sell your services. Like, yeah, a lot of us can run games, but there is a step up above that.
Sure. And
yeah,
and if you do this as kind of a corporate team building activity, I have seen a lot of companies pay a lot more money for a lot worse activities.
Absolutely.
Right? I've seen speakers brought in to address things that were just terrible. Address groups, address companies that people were like, why did we just spend $10,000, for an hour to listen to that? So I can't think of a better team building activity than D&D, right? It's engaging. It helps people work together. There's problem solving involved. It's entertaining. So
requires teamwork.
Oh yeah, all of those things. I think it's wonderful. I'd love to see this spread more, and you see more game clubs in schools being formed to bring more people together to socialize rather than sit in front of a TV or a screen or other sorts of activities that separate you. So yeah, I think it's incredible.
I just don't understand why people would be outraged by this. Like, I mean, of course, people are just going to be outraged by anything these days. It's just the way that the world works. I don't think this is one of those things that people should necessarily be outraged about. It is just, if you can come up with a business model that functions and people are willing to pay you for it, then you've figured out a way to turn your hobby into some amount of money making.
Yep. And the other thing from the article, they talked about some numbers, which I thought we should share.
Yeah, do it.
They talked to Nathan Stewart at Wizards, who said that sales of the 5th edition of the game, which was published in 2014, were up 41% in 2017 from the year before, and up another 52% in 2018, making it the biggest sales year yet. So even though it's not like he talked about it in terms of esports, where we're not to the point of like Overwatch yet. But in 2017, 9 million people watched other people play D&D on Twitch.
Yeah, we don't. That's 2017. That's not even the 2018 numbers, which I imagine are higher.
Exactly. So you get that sort of growth and that sort of demand now. There is an audience out there. Not all 9,000 or 9,000. Not all 9 million of those people are playing D&D. Right? They're watching, but they're a market. They're an easily reachable market that we need to find ways as creators of D&D or just as fans of D&D to tap into and make the hobby that much richer and give us that many more opportunities to play, to see the game in new ways. And so, that's why all of this, getting paid to DM, the Adventures League, all of these things are part of one big paradigm that needs to expand to reach into those markets.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I'm very much enjoying watching it grow and stuff, and I know, and I'm about to enter some of this myself because we're like, there's going to be a larger Misdirected Mark Twitch channel, and there's going to be a couple of streaming like game shows on there. So
Cool.
it'll be fun to see how that all plays out.
Yep.
One of them is going to be a D&D show.
Sweet.
At least it's going to be playing D&D pretty regularly. I mean, it might switch between that and another game over the course of time, but it's going to be playing D&D pretty fairly often.
Sweet.
So let's move on to the next thing. What's Project Raptor, Sean?
So it was announced on Keith-Baker.com that Keith Baker, of course, being one of the creators of the Eberron campaign in D&D, he is announcing that he will be working on a brand new Eberron sourcebook, PDF and print on demand for the DM's Guild. It will expand on Eberron in areas that only, quote unquote, only Keith will be able to. So it sounds like they're going to be talking about things that aren't going to be covered in the new Eberron hardcover that is supposedly coming out sometime in 2019. This book is going to be over 160 pages, slated for a 2019 release. Lots of art, a dedicated team of professionals for layout, editing, project management, and so on. But he was very clear in this announcement that Project Raptor is not an official source book. The Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, which was released on the DM's Guild, was produced by Wizards, even though Keith worked on it. So that is quote unquote official Wizards material, but this will not be. It is something that he is putting up on the DM's Guild like anyone else could in Eberron. But since it's Keith, people will be paying extra close attention.
I'm so excited about this book.
Yeah,
I mean, this is the original visionary for the setting, so
Right.
I mean, all of us who know how the setting was created, like it was a 10-page document, then a 100-page document from the contest a while ago in 2009, I think, if I'm doing that right. But then it got taken into development, and a whole bunch of different people helped to develop Eberron. But this is I imagine this book will have a lot of what Keith's original vision for the setting was in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like, I know a lot of that stuff is in there, but this is like him, right? His words,
Sure.
his writings.
Yep. So
It's gonna
it'll be
interesting.
it'll be very interesting to see, to see that, especially if you're a big Eberron aficionado and you want to see Keith's vision of it. It will be there. Project Raptor. You can check it out on Keith's website.
So cool.
Yep.
So you have a convention scheduled for the rest of the year, for the rest of
Yeah.
2019. You want to let us know about it?
I do.
Where can we find Sean Merwin out in the wild?
Yeah, the only reason I'm doing this is because I've been getting a lot of questions about, hey, where are you going to be? When can we play a game? Da, da, da. So I just wanted to get this out there. I will be at PAX West, which is the end of August to the beginning of September. I'm doing a panel with Teos and a bunch of people about working on creating games with using other people's intellectual property. So that will be Friday, August 30th at 4:30 in the Sandworm Theater. There is also going to be an Acquisitions Incorporated book signing that we just decided to do. So that will be Saturday from 4 to 7, and I'm not sure of the location yet. So, if you have your Acquisitions Incorporated book and you want to get it signed by all the artists and all of the Acquisitions Incorporated players and the people that did the writing on the book and the people that did the editing on the book, will hopefully all be there in one location to do a signing. I will be at Crucible in Orlando, Florida, October 11th through 13th. I'll be there alongside Travis Woodall running Adventurers League content. I will be at Gamehole Con from October 31st to November 3rd. I'm going to be on 3 panels talking about content creation, adventure design, creating your own world, publishing your own adventures, things like that. And plus I'll be running games. There are premieres of not only new games but new campaigns that I'll be involved in, so that will be cool. And Gamehole Con's a great event, so if you can get there, I'd love to see you. And last but not least, I will be at PAX Unplugged December 6th through 8th in Philadelphia. It's too soon to talk about what I'll be doing there, but hopefully we will have some pretty exciting things to do and talk about when that rolls around.
Very cool. Sounds cool. I'm not doing anything for the rest of the year. I'm staying at home.
Hey, man, staying home is also a good thing sometimes.
Cool. So that's your convention schedule for the rest of the year. I mean, I might sneak out to a convention or two between now and the end of the year, but probably not. We'll see. All right. Well, I guess we should move on to our main topic for the day, which, it's taken us a while to get there. But we still got 20 minutes to do this.
Yep.
Plenty of time. We're going to complete the challenges, resolutions, and consequences topic that we started last time.
Yep.
So this is part 10 of our Designing Adventures series, which, apparently Misdirected Mark Productions has turned into a design podcast network because every one of our podcasts seems to be talking about designing things these days. Yeah.
Well, you talk about what you know, and right now that's what we know, right?
Yeah, all of us just design games, so, Let's get back into it. Last time we covered monsters and traps.
Yep.
And today we're going to cover hazards, obstacles, puzzles, and character choices. And the point of this is not to talk about the challenges themselves, but the resolution of the types of challenges, a little bit about the challenges and the resolutions and consequences that can occur from these challenges.
Right. One of the biggest mistakes I see designers make, including myself, is that we create these encounters, we create these challenges, and we really don't think through either the mechanical or the story resolutions or consequences before we move on. So this whole thing is talking about what you should keep in mind as you create your challenges in terms of those resolutions and those consequences of the challenges for the player characters, either narratively or mechanically.
Mm-hmm. Or both.
Exactly. So
let's get into hazards.
Yes,
yeah.
let's.
So hazards are a lot like traps, in my opinion. Sometimes they're just an ongoing effect that has to be dealt with or avoided, or could be utilized in some other way. For instance, like a room of gas a steam geyser that goes off at random intervals, a river of lava, or just a fast-moving river. Those are all kinds of hazards. I find that hazards are generally known, but they can be sometimes unknown. And sprung traps can also become hazards.
Sure.
So, does that seem reasonable?
Yes. Yep. So as you're creating these, again, as we've been talking about, think about resolutions, ways that the characters are going to deal with those, and then the consequences of those various choices that the characters make.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Continue.
Okay. So the important thing to remember with hazards is, as Chris said, they are usually known or they quickly become known.
Mm-hmm. Like you could trigger them, but usually there's some sort of clue that goes along with that before you trigger them. For instance, like an avalanche, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like that's a hazard,
Yep.
in my opinion.
Yep. So as you're writing, the first thing you want to do is figure out, is it known or unknown? And if it is unknown, what are the ways to make it known? Is it going to be an investigation? Is it going to be a perception check? Is it just going to be the first thing that happens is the hazard is triggered because of something that the characters have no control over, like an enemy runs into the room and the hazard becomes known. So what are the kind of like a trap, right? What are the ways to find it?
Yeah, and traps tend to be intentional. Hazards aren't. I think that's
Very
an important
true.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hazards are naturally occurring, so it's a thing to think about when you're crafting your story and thinking about the resolutions and consequences, because that means your enemies usually don't know about them either, or if they do, they've just left them alone, so that they could be triggered by unaware player characters.
Yep. And so you have the hazard, and now we need to think about resolutions and consequences.
So the two biggest categories I think for a hazard are similar to traps. They're either going to harm you or they're going to divert you.
Mm-hmm.
They could also stall you. That would be another thing that I would say, right?
Right.
Because time is important.
And so for all of those things, right, diversion, harming, or stalling, what are then the consequences if the characters do not overcome that hazard?
So harming, you're going to lose hit points probably, right?
Yes.
Diverting you means you have to find another way, so you'll probably lose time.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the thing for what was the third one I said? I forgot.
Slowing.
Slowing, yeah. Also time. Like those seem to be the big categories that I can think of. Whereas it's usually you lose hit points or you lose time.
Right. So if you're losing time, what are some of the consequences that you as the game designer can put into an adventure that makes that consequence real, either in terms of mechanics or in terms of the narrative?
Oh, here you go. I can think of a couple off the top of my head. You ready?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. So if you were using random encounters, like a random encounter table, that means you could have one or more random encounters be tacked on to whatever you're doing, because that used to be the thing about exploring dungeons. It was a push your luck scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more you went in, the more random encounters you had to deal with on the way in and on the way out. So that's a thing to think about. If your adventure has a timer on it, like the adversaries are doing something, and there's like a timer in the background counting down, then that timer advances faster, or it advances because you're not there yet, and
Sure.
bad things could happen from that.
Let's take a quick aside here and talk about one of the most powerful tools that you as a DM or as a designer have, and that is a simple die on the table that changes numbers to show the passage of time.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good way
Right.
to increase tension
Yep.
at the table.
So if you have say you have a 12-sided die, and you start counting down throughout the adventure, you start at 12, and after an hour you go to 11, and then you go to 10. An hour in-game, I mean, not real time.
Mm-hmm.
That motivates players like you would not believe.
Mm-hmm. It
However,
also makes the short rest and the long rest very interesting.
Exactly. However, if there are no consequences to that, it loses its power quickly. But if there are consequences, and again, consequences can just be narrative; they don't necessarily have to be mechanical. You go from 12 to 11, you just move it, nothing happens. You just go from 11 to 10, nothing happens. Players might start to get complacent. Then when it goes from 10 to 9, then you say the mountain that you're in begins to shake. Now you have put a slight and narrative consequence, but it's there. It's in their minds, and they know that something is happening because time is passing and that die is counting down.
And you can use that also as a mechanical impetus too, if you want to, at some point, because then you can have, as that die is moving down, you can have encounters where, like, you have a thing in the encounter, like, well, if the D12 is at 6, this is a new thing that happens in the encounter, or is already in the room when you walk in.
Sure.
So, like, if you get to 6. You get to this room and there's already 6 in the die.
Yep.
Then there's another, like, shaking in the mountain.
Yep.
And there's, like, some crumbled stone passageway that's now open. But behind that stone passageway, some terrible monster comes out of it during the encounter this time, or is already out there eating the things that were in the room.
Yep. So like Chris said, mechanically it's changing because of this hazard has slowed you down. So there are mechanical game consequences. You just want to make sure, as the writer, as the DM, you want to tie that. You want to make sure that they realize that because the reason that these 3 extra spiders are in the room is because time has passed, the mountain has shaken enough that it's opened this passage. So as you announce the extra 3 spiders in the room, then you turn the die at the same time to make that connection.
Mm-hmm. There's a thing on our list that we didn't put in there, which we should have, which is time. Time is actually a challenge.
Right.
Right, because we have monsters, traps, hazards, obstacles, puzzles, and character choices, but we didn't put time in there, and time should totally be on the list.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think we can do it the way we're doing it now. Time isn't necessarily a challenge, but time is a consequence. And it's less a consequence with monsters, although it can be. But it's more in these things we're talking about now, these hazards, these obstacles, where the consequence of not easily moving past them is time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're absolutely right that time will become a bigger factor in all of the resolutions and consequences that we'll talk about from here on out through challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about are obstacles in some way, shape, or form, but they're fairly more specific to D&D, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hazards, traps, and monsters are very D&D centric.
Yep.
Obstacles are sort of the generalized version of this. Like, these are things that you need to deal with to move this forward in the story or in the adventure. And to me, obstacles tend to create opportunities for the characters to create story. I often assume an obstacle will probably be overcome, but how the PCs overcome it will impact the game moving forward in some way. That is usually how I view obstacles when I'm designing them.
Okay.
Can I give you some examples?
I would love to hear some examples.
Yeah, sure. So a gap in a mountain trail that you need to get across to continue, that's an obstacle. A town guard who doesn't seem to want to let people through the gate, that is an obstacle. Mm-hmm. A fire that's sprung up in the building you're fighting in, that's keeping you from the exit. A villain who has information that you require to move on to stop their plot. Mm-hmm. Or you're on an airship and it's losing its elemental binding, which would be bad for a number of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all obstacles to me.
Sure. Yeah, I think what you've described, some of these obstacles are very, very specific.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the fire that you have to get past. That is a very small but significant obstacle. Mm-hmm. Whereas, you know, you could also have a large obstacle like, you know, a mountain in your way that you could either, you know, go over, which will be faster, save you time, but be dangerous, or go around. So you're avoiding the danger, but you're adding time.
Yes.
Yep.
So, like, that's the thing about obstacles. They're very broad. They have a bunch of different applications, and I tried to cite a bunch of different examples that would show the variety that you can drop in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, in dealing with obstacles, there's kind of a couple of ways that I sort of think about the design of them. a lot of times I will just kind of leave them there without a lot of answers if I'm just writing for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I'll just leave it up to the player characters to figure it out. But and I'm going to assume that they're going to cost resources in some way, shape, or form, because that's going to let the players be more inventive. I mean, we have spells for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
And other gear. If you're looking to have a role assigned to it, what I tend to do is assign some difficulty check levels, something for like easy, medium, and hard.
Mm-hmm.
And if the characters attempt something that could work to overcome the obstacle, then you can use those as sort of your guideline, or like
Okay.
a benchmark for making rolls. So like if I have a DC 12, a DC 16, and a DC 20,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they say something that seems like, well, that seems about average in my opinion as a game master, then I will say that's a DC 16 roll. But if it sounds like, wow, that's really easy, then I'll say but it's not automatic, then it's a DC 12.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the resources just make it so that they get around it, right? Like, well, they cast a spell, they used a spell slot, they get around it.
Right.
They spent some of their mechanical resource.
Yep, they cast Mass Fly to get over the chasm.
Yeah,
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I mean they just used one of their spell slots.
Yep.
So
Okay.
that's how I think about obstacles. Do you have what would you like to add to that?
The only thing I would like to add is, this is the area where you really have to think things through consequence-wise and resolution-wise, because you don't want to put up an obstacle that completely halts the game. Oh, you can't get past the stuck door kind of situation. Well, you can't get to the rest of the dungeon. You want to be careful putting in those sorts of scenarios. Always give an option to continue, but the consequences for those other options can be, as dire as you want them to be, as long as it's a reasonable way to continue and reasonable so it doesn't just completely wipe out the party.
Yeah,
that make sense?
absolutely. By the way, designers out there, be it for your home game or for published adventures, never write a block into your adventure. That's a terrible idea.
Yeah. Yep.
If you need to go that way, like if that is part of the if that is an important next step to your adventure, even your dungeon or whatever, don't put a block in there. If there's ever, I mean, I think we've said it before. I think we've said it probably 100 times on the variety of shows that we're all on and interviews that we've all been on or whatever, panels.
Yep.
Pick a thing. If there's ever a situation where you need a die roll to succeed to move past it, then don't do that.
Right. A die roll being the only way to move past it.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
And again, you can make it an obstacle so that they have to take another path.
Mm-hmm.
But that always leave that other path.
If it stops the adventure, don't do that.
The only way that I would see that happening, and again, this isn't a block situation, but it comes very close, is if you've created a scenario where the players needed something to continue, and they either recklessly destroyed the object that they needed, or they recklessly refused to get the information that they needed, knowing that they would need it, but just continued on anyway. That's where it's okay to put up a block. But they always have that path to go back and get the thing they need to continue. Go back and get the item, the magical key that they needed to open this door. Or, to get the information to find the trail through this mountain to the next city where their quest leads them. So it's okay to put up a very stiff obstacle, but there is a path that they have leading back to go forward again. You just don't want to do that too much because then players might get frustrated. But for me, if it's something that's obvious that they just refuse to do out of stubbornness or a lack of caring, then that obstacle helps reinforce the kind of play that you as the writer or the DM are encouraging to think things through before you just rush forward.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, I think I've seen that design in a lot of places too, right? Like, One of the more classic ones, if I remember correctly, is in some of the Pathfinder adventure paths. Like, every once in a while in an adventure, you see that. Like, you get to this part of a dungeon, and then you can't go past it because you don't have the thing.
Right.
And you should probably go back and get the thing from the person. That has been hinted at a few times.
Yep, and that's also just a way to keep people from going into things that they couldn't handle, obviously.
It's true.
But again, that's not an obstacle that stops completely. That's just rerouting someone to the area that they need to be at, either mechanically or story-wise, before they should continue.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about puzzles.
So, just in general, we've talked about puzzles many, many times. Again, pick a panel, pick a show, pick an interview, pick a blog. We've talked about puzzles. Many players love puzzles. Many players, when they see a puzzle hit the table, their eyes light up because they love puzzles. But there are also many that despise them, and as soon as the puzzle hits the table, they leave the room and say, "Let me know when you're done."
I'm one of them.
Yeah. And so some people dislike puzzles because they're not challenging the character. They're something that the player does.
That's why I don't like them.
Yeah. And there are ways to design around that, but then it really just turns into a set of roles for your character. Make an intelligence check 42 times. So, before you do a puzzle, know your audience, if you know your players, or at the very least, make the puzzle something that is very tied into the story that you're telling. The puzzle shouldn't be, here, do this crossword puzzle just because I want you to do a crossword puzzle. Make it fit into the situation that the players are in, that makes them use the tools that are at hand. Make it be something that really, as the character, they would know about, even if it's them as the player solving it.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that in mind, like any other encounter type, when puzzles are poorly done, they're just a pass-fail thing. Oh, you did the puzzle, you go forward. Oh, you failed the puzzle, you failed. Rather than doing that, make the puzzle a nuanced and multi-layered thing in terms of resolution and consequences. That said, here's how I like to do puzzles. The characters are going to succeed at the puzzle somehow. That is a given.
Mm-hmm.
However, what is at stake is how well they succeed, how quickly they succeed, and then there are consequences based on various levels of resolution. So if I give them a puzzle, there's a mural up on the wall with pictures that have something to do with the adventure that they're on. And there are several gemstones lying on the floor and several holes where these gemstones will fit within the mural. They're going to figure it out, that the gemstones of certain colors go into certain spots in the mural based on the backstory of this whole quest that they're on. So, they should know right away, if they're paying attention, that their quest and this mural are tied, and these gemstones will fit into the overall story in some way. If they figure it out right away, they get a bonus going forward. If it takes them a while, or if they need to make skill checks or ability checks or anything else, they will succeed, but they won't get the bonuses. Write in some way where there are clues around that you can point to. And if they end up using every single clue that is in the adventure, then they succeed, but rather than a bonus or rather than no bonus, they get penalties mechanically in the next encounter. There are extra villains. They have they're late, so they have disadvantage on the initiative check. Something small that either rewards or penalizes them for their acuity with the puzzle. Do you have anything to add, Chris?
I do. I like everything that you're saying. That's actually how I prefer to design puzzles when I am designing puzzles. If I'm going to use them, I like to. So for me, puzzles are such a meta thing, right? Like, and I don't even mind meta, but it's weird because you're like, these are character level characters dealing with something that the player is playing, is actually solving. Mm-hmm. So when I have those clues that are given out and whatnot, I prefer to let the character's knowledge be the thing that garners them the clues through dice rolls. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that determines whether they're going to get possible bonuses or penalties moving forward, right? Like, I mean, if you don't need the clue and you just kind of solve it, any of the clues, then you're gonna get the bonus that you're clever. Good job.
Yep.
If you need a clue, I prefer to let the characters use their abilities to garner those clues.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then those rolls there determine the thing that you were talking about, whether they get bonuses or negatives to the thing moving forward.
Sure. Yeah.
That's the only modification for my design, which I think your design is perfectly fine too. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I think I do pretty much the same thing. I think I do what you're talking about as kind of the middle stage if they don't solve it right away. Hey, with a history check, you know that this sort of dragon in the mural was often seen near the diamond mines of blank.
Yeah, and
there's the diamond. There's the mural. Boom. Yes.
Yeah, and because you rolled so high, you do it quickly.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And then, then if they are completely way off on the puzzle, that's when you can introduce, an NPC who might be with them can give them clues, or you just break it right down to, hey, that ruby that you were going to put the scratch patterns on it look like the scratch patterns on this part of the mural, right?
You've taken enough time that you notice this thing now.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, that's puzzles. Like I'm with you. Yep. I think that if you're going to do them, that's the way to do them.
Yep.
In my opinion,
yep.
That's my opinion.
So again, just make graded resolutions with mechanical or narrative benefits or drawbacks, rather than just a simple pass-fail status for puzzles.
Mm-hmm. Oh, let's talk about choices. Choices are a thing.
Yes. Choices. They're all about consequences, Chris.
They are, in fact, all about consequences because whatever you choose will have some sort of impact on the story going forward. Because that's the thing about choices. Like, we make choices constantly in role-playing games, right? Like, we choose to do this or we choose to do that. But there are moments in games where those choices seem to have a much bigger impact on what's going to happen going forward. Mm-hmm. So if you've ever played a video game or if you've ever read a choose-your-own-adventure novel, then you know exactly what we're going to be talking about, which is like, well, you have several options that seem to be reasonable, mm-hmm. and you have to make a choice based on some of those options, and then there will be fallout and success for some of that. Now, of course, there'll be the people that want to figure out a way to get around that in mm-hmm. some way, shape, or form, and they come up with an idea that will allow for that, but it's not easy. And that's when you start introducing die rolls.
Yep.
You're like, sure, make your check, and then you can do the thing, but if you don't, well, then you're getting the failure state in probably a worse way.
Mm-hmm.
And the negative consequence.
Exactly.
Maybe both of them.
Yeah, sure. One thing to keep in mind with choices is, as Chris said, you may think you're putting you can go this way, or this way with your choice. Always be prepared for characters to try to do all of the above. If you're talking about the path, like you find the note that says, I'm going to kill the queen, the bishop, and the guildmaster. Who are you going to save? And you might think, okay, everyone's going to pick one, and they will all go that direction, and then they all split up to take on all three challenges. So
good luck.
Yeah, well, good luck, but always keep that in mind. Always, this is why playtesting is so important. Think things through when you're writing. Then be the DM as you read it, going, okay, I'm DMing this. I could see this happening. Then be the player. Hey, if I was playing this, what would I do? I would try to do all three. So always carefully cogitate on the consequences and make sure that the choices you're giving are what the players or the DM will most likely think through.
Yeah, some of my favorite things to do when building these things up is to put people in difficult situations where they can't, where the choice that they make there's not a right or a wrong. Right. So like you've had a relationship with an NPC for a long time, and maybe several sessions, and then you find out all of a sudden that they're not betraying you, but they're doing something that is against what you think is against essentially your moral code, but they have real reasons for doing it. Like maybe they're seeking revenge for a loved one who was killed. Mm-hmm. But this is somebody that you care about a lot too. And it's like, well, do you stop them in that moment when you have the chance? Or do you let them go and try to convince them that their path is wrong later? It's either one, and usually those are like, that's the choice too, because if you stop them there and now, like your friends or the town guard or whoever is going to kill them. Mm-hmm. Right? So like, do you let this person get away to try to redeem them later, or do you stop the problem now with the possibility of terrible things happening later because of this person running around? Mm-hmm. Like those are interesting choices to me. Those are some severe consequences, very personal consequences.
Yeah, it's we talk about choices or and the consequences for choices that you make, and over the years of running organized play, we would gather in various campaigns feedback on, did your table succeed? What did they do? And we would always put some moral or just plain what do you do choice in. You have the crown of Valhalla. Do you give it to the mayor? Do you give it to the seamstress who needs it to save her family? Or do you keep, all of these choices? And 90% of the time, the choice would be pretty obvious based on what the players did. We would be lucky, if you had 4 choices, we would be lucky if one of the choices wasn't 80% of the time the players did this. Once, and this is why I love Teos Abadia so much, once Teos created a scenario where you had a choice of what to do with this power that had to be put somewhere. It could be put in a person. It could be spread out among various people, or it was like I think it was a 3-level choice, and it was so great because when I looked at the survey at the end of the adventure's run, it was like 35, 34, 33.
That's perfect.
It was like, wow, this choice really obviously resonated with people, and it was something that they really thought about, and it wasn't an obvious power gamer, well, we're just going to do this because it's we're min-maxing our choice, right? Mm-hmm. This is the maximum benefit for us with the minimum drawback, so we're going to do it. It was very nuanced, and I love that.
Yeah, they're not always easy to design into games. I've never had a very easy time designing them into adventures, because a lot of the adventures that I tend to write are short, and in my campaign play, they end up being a lot easier for me, because eventually you'll have a bunch of these strings to pull on, which is why probably in an organized campaign where you can assume some of these strings will be there later in the campaign, you can pull on them a little bit more effectively.
Yep. And you just want to be careful with one of the things that seems like a good idea and rarely is the choice of, you can do one of 2 things. One thing increases your character's power, but it's bad for other people, and one of them is good for other people, but you either lose power or you fail to gain power that you could have. And so it's sort of this moral choice of do what's right versus do what's good for you power-wise. And it's just not great because it separates 2 types of gamers. Right? Usually the narrative type of folks are like, assuming their characters are good, they're going to do what's right. Whereas if you do if you play with people that are all about their own character and gaining power and magic items and whatever, they're always going to do what's wrong, even if their characters are lawful good, right? And so try to get more nuanced than that, if you can.
I'm with you,
Yeah.
100%. We're running out of time. It's almost an hour.
Okay.
I guess the last.
Yeah,
Want
I
to talk
think
about
we-
combining them real quick?
Yeah, we can talk about combining them real quick. For me, we've talked about all of these challenges and what their resolutions and consequences are. Combining the challenges in a way is where the best part of D&D adventure design lives, right? So it's not about, it's not just about the choice. It's about making the choice while you're fighting the monster.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not just about the solving the puzzle. It's about solving the puzzle when you have the time limit of dealing with a trap.
Yep.
And then you can really make some nuanced resolutions. You can give various options of, do we kill the monster first and then make the choice? Or do we make the choice even though we're going to have to leave the monsters alive and run away from them because of that choice? All of these things come together to really make memorable challenges with consequences that can be very nuanced and ongoing in terms of the story and in terms of mechanics. So if you can,
agree completely.
if you can find ways to combine them, do that.
Yep. That's the. I mean, there's some nuance that we can talk about combining them. Like, I wouldn't try to put more than 2, maybe 3 of these things together in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
After that, it gets a little too convoluted.
Mm-hmm.
Try to be clear when you can with where these things are coming from and how they kind of work together. That is, especially when you're explaining it to the dungeon master. That is always the thing. Like, trying to explain what you're trying to get across in your adventure is important, and this is even more important.
Yep.
Like, how do these
Sidebars are your friend.
sidebars are your friend, and how these things kind of work, or if you even have a section like what you're going for, or the intent.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, like we just said, sidebars are important because sidebars are a place where you can talk not about the actual design, but about your intent. Mm-hmm. This is meant to test the players in this way, and these are the various sorts of resolutions and consequences I'm thinking about for your campaign as they make these decisions or succeed or fail with these challenges as you run it.
Absolutely. All right, we good?
We're good.
All right, that was really fun. I think this is a really good topic. I'm glad we took the time to take 2 weeks to talk about it.
Exactly.
Let's do some Patreon shoutouts now. Since it's the first episode of the month, we're going to do the Royal Court, because that's what we do with the first episode of the month for these shows. Eileen Barnes, the Duchess of Panda's Talking Games. Andrew Dacey, the Warden of Whiskies. Angie Olson, the Duke of Dice. Brian Kurtz, the Royal Doctor of Physic. Christopher Gray, the Spy Master of MMP. Craig Just Craig, the Lord of One Name. Donnie Harville, the Lord of the Slack Room. Eric Bonce, the Duke of Gators and the Lord of Beefness. GM Gerrymander, the Lord of the After Show. Jesse Edmond, our editor and the Royal Doctor. Jim Likes Games, the Royal Merchant. John C. LeMay, the Guard at the End of the World. John Carney, the Court Necromancer. Kevin Lovecraft, the Royal Beard. Merrick Blackman, the Royal D&D Reviewer. Mike Dinos, the Inquisitive Mark. P.K. Sullivan, the Queen's Royal Rocketeer. Rob Abrazato, the Gauntlet of the Queen and our Chief. He pays us now, so thanks, Rob. Schmitty, the Keeper of the Labyrinth. Toby Sennett, the Baron of Britannia. Todd Crapper, the Prophet of Probability. Richard Wyatt, the Captain of the Royal Airship Fleet. And Jared Rasher, the Scribe of MMP. That Royal Court keeps getting bigger and bigger.
It does, and we love you. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of patrons, if you'd like to be a patron of Down with D&D, you can click on the link to our Patreon page on the website, and for $2 a month, you can get yourself a shout-out. Not like that, because that's $10 a month, but for $2 a month, you can get a shout-out.
But if you want to split that difference, then for $4 a month, you get a shout-out like you just heard, but you also get to see our show notes, and you get access to our Slack room where you can talk with us or the other Misdirected Mark folk whenever you so choose.
Yeah, I think Steve Bissonette just joined for $4, and he's like in there now, so we can talk, so we can chat with us.
Hey, yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, if you can't help us monetarily, but you want to give us a boost, you can do so with an Apple Podcast review.
Those help even if you're not listening via Apple Podcasts, because other podcatchers use Apple Podcasts to rate and rank shows. So if you gave us a nice review, that would help make us more visible, and we'd appreciate it so much.
Sean, where can we find you on the internet?
The best place to find me at the moment is on Twitter at Sean Merwin, although we do have some forums.
There are forums, in fact. Come join the forums. It's forum.misdirectedmark.com.
Yay, come talk to us. How about you? Where do you find you, Chris?
Me, it's at the Light 101. That's my Twitter handle. But there's also the show and the network Twitter, which is at Misdirected Mark. So that's a place. You can also just go to the website, and on the website you can catch a bunch of other great shows. One of them is Bone Stone and Obsidian, where you can hear Robert Aducci and Wayne Chang talk about Dark Sun, all versions of Dark Sun, all kinds of Dark Sun. They usually put out their episodes monthly, and it's a lot of terrible, awful, sun-beating, murderous, Sorcerer King fun.
Yay. Misdirected Mark. Whoops. Try that again. Down with D&D is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs.
So, buddy, what are we going to do now?
We're going to go kill some monsters without consequence.
Seems unlikely.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?